When you think about Jesse Jackson and you think about his impact, what's the first thing that comes to mind for you?
Well, I thought about that a lot when I got the call this morning, right after he'd passed, asked to pray with the family. And his son, who was there with him, actually laid there with him until he took his last breath, Jesse Jr. And his wife said something, a mighty lion has fallen. The scripture in the Bible said, oh, when the mighty have fallen. And I thought about what his might was. It wasn't weapons and meanness and violence and hurt, but a lion protects the pride and expands the pride. Jesse protected, he fought to protect what was won in the civil rights movement, not just for black people. He often spoke of how the Civil Rights Movement, the Voting Rights Act, the Civil Rights Act of '64 benefited black people, women, white women, men, poor people. And it wasn't just a victory for black people. And Dr. King wasn't just a black leader. He was a moral leader. And civil rights are not just about black. It's about the promises of our Constitution and the promises of our deep moral values. But lions also, the male lion expands the pride, gives the pride more room. And so Jesse, I think about, was always trying to expand. He wanted to see us not only sit at the uh, counter, but be able to own it and buy stuff. He understood the connection between civil rights and economic justice. When he ran for president, he didn't just run so he could get a book deal or run just to say he could run. He ran to win, and he did. He won in Mississippi, South Carolina, came in second, North Carolina, second in Tennessee, won in Virginia. Things that people hadn't seen. Went all the way to the convention, registered 7 million new voters, changed the rules so that more people could get in. And in his 1984 speech, we all ought to be listening to that right now because it really is the answer to the extremism we see now. Because he didn't give a list of grievances. He didn't get up in his speech and just talk about how much he disliked his opponent. He listed hope. He listed a goal. He listed what could happen if we lifted from the bottom, if we brought people together in this rainbow where every color is distinct, but every color has to stay connected for it to be a true rainbow. And he offered America a vision of hope and love and possibility over against the ugliness of lies and racism. And I thought about all of that, and will continue to think about it, and have tried to do it in the work that I've been called to do with repairs of the breach, build what we call moral fusion, where we do moral analysis, moral articulation, moral activism, and moral agenda building that brings in all people. And finally, the work that we do that we try to model is to recognize that systemic racism, systemic poverty, ecological devastation, denial of health care, the war economy, and the false moral narrative religious nationalism requires everybody, black, white, brown, Asian, indigenous, young, old, gay, straight. And Jesse had that kind of perspective. He was engaged in religious, faith-based activism long before the what I call the heresy of so-called Christian nationalism. Jesse took Jesus seriously when he said, "We got that a nation will be judged by how it treats the least of these."
Know that you guys have been through a lot together. I mean, you guys were arrested together and trying to institute change. When you reflect on that, what comes to mind?
And we were arrested 3 times together. I first met Reverend Jackson when I was 19. I was 20. I was a senior. I was the head of the student government at North Carolina Central, and he asked me to serve as one of his student coordinators for his run for the presidency. That morning when he came to speak, they had somebody else prepared to introduce him, and he said, "No, I want the student to do it." He didn't even know me. He said, "So two things he taught me: you got to always be prepared around Reverend Jackson, but also he understood that you can't, if you're going to build, you can't keep calling on the same people. You got to get the unexpected ones." And it was unexpected that the student, rather than some major political leader that was already established, then he went to Duke. He didn't just go to North Carolina Central. He went to Duke. He went to UNC. Went to A&T. Uh, when we recently got arrested, once was in Washington, D.C., when we went in to deliver an agenda for poor and low wage people. And they said, you can't do that. And we said, why can't we do it? And they said, you can't go to the speaker's office. And they said, we'll arrest you. And so we submitted to that because what we weren't going to do was just turn around and do nothing. We didn't go to get arrested. When we were fighting during COVID to make sure that money went to the people that needed it, that people got the assistance and all the money didn't just go to corporations, and they refused to let us go in and said, if you stay here, you're going to arrest us. We did that to arrest the attention of the nation. And then when voting rights, when we had an opportunity to fix the Voting Rights Act, and extremists said no. Not only to that, they said no, we're not even going to raise a living wage, and if you keep standing here, we're going to arrest you. We said, well, you can do that, but what we're not going to do, along with these other people, is just turn around. You know, nonviolence is not non-action. It is when you are so committed to something, but you choose your weapons, and your weapons are not lies and meanness and violence. Your weapons are love and truth, and if necessary, a willingness to be arrested. And Jesse was sick when he did this. I want folk to hear that. We were marching from from in Texas, 105-degree heat. I look up and saw Jesse. I said, Reverend, you don't have to be out here. He was 79 then. He said, yes, I do. I have to be out here. And I said, but Reverend, you know, we can do this. He said, no, you will do it. You're going to have to do it. But as long as I've got breath in my body, I'm going to stand up for what's right. And so determination is one of the things that I think about because he often told us the ground is no place for a champion. You might get knocked down, but the mark of your champion, whether or not you're a champion, is how you get up. And that's how you keep hope alive, by continuing to get up and get again and again and again.
As we are in 2026, and so much has changed, even from the time that you guys have met. What do you want his legacy to be, and how do you think that we can continue to honor that legacy?
I'm glad you asked that question because a lot of people will say, well, how do you celebrate? And actually, somebody like Jesse or Rosa Parks or Dr. King would say, you don't. They never want to be celebrated. They want to be imitated. They want to be what you do with prophetic moral leaders is none of us are perfect, but in the things that we do well and do right, you want somebody to pick up the baton. See, every leader drops the baton. When they die, they drop the baton. How do we honor that legacy? We pick it up. So right now, we're in the battle for voting rights. There's an attempt right now to gut the Voting Rights Act totally. We need to pick up that baton. We had 90 million people that stayed home in the last election. 90 million. And the Congress was decided by only 7,000 votes. We need to pick up that baton and begin to move and inspire people to vote and figure out why they're not. In our own state, the presidential election was decided by 183,000 votes, 1,800 votes per county, but over 1.1 million poor and low wage people stayed home. And the number one reason they did it, they said nobody's talked to them. So the legacy of Reverend Jackson would be doing what he did. When he ran, he went to the Iowa and would be, you could see him ride on the back of a tractor. Then you would see him on a reservation. Then you would see him in the Delta of Mississippi. Then you see him in Harlem. Then you see him in the Florida. I mean, he didn't just, nowhere was off limits. He went where the people were. And that's a part of the legacy that we have to recover. Uh, a lot of the extremism that we see going on today is for two reasons. Number one, people winning because folk are staying home, not necessarily because they're winning great majorities. And number two, too many politicians and others are rehearsing their grievances, but not giving people hope, not saying, this is what I will do if I'm elected. If you go listen to Reverend Jackson's 1984 and 88 speeches for the presidency, he very seldom talked about his opponent. He very seldom went negative. He didn't do that. He talked about keep hope alive. Here's what we can do. Here's the power you have. Here's the numbers you have. If you vote me, this is what's going to happen. That's what we need to hear today. That's the legacy we need to cover. You know, if somebody's running for office, tell me what's going to happen in the first 50 days of your election. Don't tell me how bad you don't like Trump or you don't like somebody or something. No, no, no. What are you going to do? Which is why this past weekend we had the It's Time to Love Forward together, a massive rally, thousands of people. We were modeling some of what we learned through even in the rainbow. And that is, look at the diversity of the people that came together last Saturday. Look at how broad it was in North Carolina, saying, here's an agenda: healthcare, living wages, education, uh, uh, cooling, moving ICE out of the way, getting back to a society where we don't have police and military in the street. That's a vision of hope. And that's one of the things that Jesse kept saying: keep hope alive. And hope is not just some daydreaming. You keep hope alive by continuing to work on it. My grandmother, I had a chance to drive Jesse's mother one day, and we were talking about different things, and I told her a story about my grandmother. My grandmother used to say, how do you keep hope alive when you're cutting down a tree? I said, what? She said, how do you keep hope alive when you're cutting down a tree? I said, I don't know. She said, keep cutting. That's how you keep hope alive, because every chip gets you closer to that tree falling. You just got to keep chopping at it. And if that's part of the legacy that I hope we pick up, Martin King, Rosa Parks, Harriet Tubman, Frederick Douglass, Jesse Jackson, John Lewis, one of the things that we have to learn from them is consistency, determination, deep intellect, and a persistence that refused to believe things could not change.
Is there anything else that you want to add or that you think is important? I mean, I know that there's probably so much that we could talk about,
Yeah.
but anything else that comes to mind?
Well, two things for younger people. You know, I'm 63 now, so I can talk about younger people. Reverend Jackson, on one occasion, made me angry. I mean, a bunch of us, because we were going around the state, and he would send us out as surrogates, and we messed up. I messed up on a couple of points, facts, and he heard about it, and he made us stay up all night studying. And the next morning, he said, "You don't get a second chance." He said, "You don't want to be a bumper sticker leader. You don't want to be somebody who's loud and wrong. Know your," even he said he'd make us even study our adversaries' arguments, so we knew them better than they did. And he said, you can't go to school. He pushed me, because I thought about it after undergraduate going into the movement. He said, no, go to school, go get your graduate degree, do all of those things, because the movement will call you when it's time. But prepare for it. Don't wait till you're in it to prepare. Prepare before, so that time can call you when the time is right. And then the last thing is, I want the same day that I introduced him to about 1,000 students at North Carolina Central, we didn't have a precinct on campus. But when he left, we decided we were gonna get a precinct on campus. We marched 2,000 students to the polls, and then we fought the next year to get a precinct on campus so that it could be you. You know, Jesse taught us, don't just accept what you're handed. And that same day, lastly, we went out to eat, and we went into this restaurant, and the lady said, "Oh my goodness, that's Jesse. Jesse, give him what he wants free." He said, "No, ma'am. There's two folk out there homeless. Feed them. I can pay. My job is not for you to feed me because you think I'm some person or some celebrity. My job is to open up the possibility for them to eat." I have never forgotten that. I have never forgotten that. That he didn't just fall all over and say, "Oh, she's just gonna give me free stuff." He said no, and he went outside and got the guys and brought them in and said, "Now, if you want to give them something free, do that, or I'll pay for it." Leaders who care about the people deeply and want to see other people blessed, that's a true mark of leadership.